For quite a long time in my life, I used to think that I was incapable of being happy. And of course, even back then, there were moments where I felt more or less joyful and free and at peace. But at the same time, I always had the sense that I was somehow wired wrong, that I wasn't really capable of finding a true, meaningful, lasting happiness. I felt that I was doomed to always have this neurotic sense of dissatisfaction, that this was somehow a core part of what I am. And of course, I could try to mask that by pushing myself really hard, having some kind of success, distracting myself. But this nagging sense of dissatisfaction wouldn't really leave me for long. So it was quite surprising to me when later on I discovered that I was indeed very capable of happiness. I was just operating from a very wrong assumption of what I am. I was looking at life and engaging with the world from a very limited perspective of what I thought myself to be. I really thought myself to be this limited person which was going through life, had some successes and failures, had all these flaws in its personality, and of course some good traits. But all of that was my identity. I was wrapped up in that, really thinking myself to be that in a fundamental way. And of course, in some sense, it's totally rational to think of oneself on this level. If somebody asks me about my personal history, I can of course recall that. I can speak of things I can do well and things I'm not so good at. But there's a tremendous difference if we identify with this construct of characteristics. If we take all of that and believe that they somehow form some stable, coherent, actually existing entity, and then thinking we are that entity. If this is how we're going through life, then of course dissatisfaction will arise very easily. Anything that threatens this construct, this identity, will trigger this sense of neurotic dissatisfaction. And so whenever we have peace of any kind, it feels fragile. We feel vulnerable. And of course, that's not the case for everybody. I saw people who seemed to be happy and quite content with themselves. But I just thought that wasn't possible for me. I thought they were blessed in some way, through their genetics or life history, or for whatever other kind of reason. But I really thought that this happiness was a kind of privilege which I had no right to. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that happiness is your birthright. Peace is the nature of your being. And you can discover that for yourself. All that's necessary is to see, to realize, to discover what you are in a much more fundamental way. And what you will discover is that you are always essentially whole. You are not some kind of limited entity. You are a boundless wholeness which is awake. And this awakeness is not somehow floating out there somewhere. It is totally intimate with everything you are experiencing. As a matter of fact, anything you are experiencing is just the expression of your fundamental being. And so peace, interconnectedness, wholeness, these are not properties which you can somehow luck into, which you get through a good fortune of genetics and environmental circumstances. These positive qualities I just described are inherent in your nature. And so when you discover what you really are, you also discover that what you really are is peace itself. And happiness then can just spring forth, come to the foreground in a very natural way, not as a result of your doing, but because you have been liberated out of this contracted identity. You have discovered a peace, a wholeness, which wasn't really possible, which seemed inaccessible for this limited person. And this is a discovery that is possible for everyone. If you are listening to my voice right now, then you are listening to it as this unbounded awareness. And you, as this unbounded awareness, have the potential to discover your true nature. And it is, in fact, amazingly easy to do so. It's just that we are so conditioned into our usual way of identification that we never care to look. We never care to discover what we are fundamentally. And making that discovery is definitely worthwhile.